Coming up on today's episode of Hit and Roll with Brent Bushnell.
And then somebody from Microsoft was in the audience at one of those events and was like, hey, we got E3 coming up. Like, we got a big after party. Like, would you guys do the entertainment? And we're like, what? You're going to pay us? There weren't VR attractions at the time. So we went down to, Oculus and got prototype DK1s, like from Palmer Luckey directly. And, we built like some of the first VR attractions since the 90s. We did a carnival in Los Angeles, 5,000 people a day. It was 90,000 square feet. We had IBM and Intel and Autodesk and Disney and all these incredible sponsors, partners, and a fire suit company. That was when I learned that fire marshals are total pyros.
You're listening to Hit and Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. I'm artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm game designer Branson Faustini. And together, we get to talk to the people who make the world of fun.
And my short list of the most creative people I've ever met, like I said, is a short list, and we get one of them today. I'd like to welcome Brent Bushnell. He's the CEO of Two Bit Circus, an entertainment incubator with a public showcase in downtown Los Angeles. The company is focused on creating social play for all ages. Brent is the chairman of the nonprofit Two Bit Foundation, which deploys STEAM-based programs to inspire students about creativity and invention. Brent is also a Sir Edmund Hillary Fellow and a supporter of Clowns Without Borders. If that doesn't say as an introductory bio says creativity, I'm like, that right there is creativity. Brent, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
David, you guys, thanks so much for having me. I so appreciate it. Really great to be here.
So Clowns Without Borders, so clowns to some of us have been like a scary thing.
I know. It's so sad too, because it's mostly America. Yeah. You go to Europe, clowns are still a revered art form. There is an actual permanent circus tent on the coast of Monaco, if you can believe it. And the World Circus Festival happens every year, like the freaking Emmys. And it is amazing. So, clowns, I still love, and I'm a trained clown. Clowns Without Borders actually exists. So this is a group that brings clowns into refugee camps and places that don't have a lot of fun and joy. I was just really taken with the mission, and bringing joy out to the world is really close to my heart. So that just felt like a really natural fit. So I was like, this belongs in my bio because people need to know that this place exists.
No, it's awesome. If it wasn't for it, that's where I think clowns went awry in this country, is from some of the horror films.
Yeah, well, and interestingly, clowns reflect back on society their own feelings, and often are making large the sentiments that are sort of already there, and it's sort of interesting that what a lot of Americans see is a scary thing, because I do feel like on a lot of levels we are in a pretty dark place, like depression's way up and sadness is way up and people are home alone, and I think there's an opportunity to see a more joyful thing.
Well, I like that you're bringing the joy back. It's like redeeming childhoods.
Yeah.
Branson, when you say just about everybody that we talk to that is like uber creative, they're like kids that never
grew up.
Yeah, they never grew up.
I love that.
You grew up kind of in and around the industry. Could you talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So I just had this absolutely terrible childhood. No, just kidding. We were, my dad founded Atari and then out of that founded Chuck E. Cheese, which literally sort of birthed out of Atari.
Okay,
Labs.
I just want to pause right there. Your dad founded Atari and then Chuck E. Cheese. Like just the weight of that sentence of I'm a game inventor and my kids get to play test things, but I'm like, you're getting the first look at play that was changing the whole world.
It was such a wild thing because we have, I have 7 siblings and, 3 sisters and 4 brothers. We all grew up in, around all of that stuff. And, we didn't really play a lot of Atari. Dad was always bringing home the new stuff. So why did we want to play that old stuff? And so, we would play Nintendo and Sega and, all these other ones as they were, because talk about somebody who never grew up, my dad had total just good kid at heart, and so walls of board games, and we were always tinkering and making stuff, and he had his sort of laboratory downstairs, and so it was just normal, and watch Dad make stuff and want to make stuff ourselves, and so I can remember my brothers and I just sitting there with making levels of games on, pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper laid out all over the whole room, and just obsessed.
Did you guys have like the unlimited golden ticket quarter when you got to go to Chuck E. Cheese? It's like,
I don't remember a lot of scarcity of tokens. I was young during the heydays of this, 4 and 5. And so they're foggy memories. But, I do remember the opening of one of the larger locations that had this ginormous block of cheese that was like a multi-level play gym for kids, and just like disappearing into this, block of cheese for, for hours. It was fun and weird. And in true entrepreneurial form, we watched the whole ride. And after that, Dad founded this incubator that went on to create some really incredible stuff. Mapping company that was literally dead reckoning, sensors on the tires. We had a little vector display in his car in the 80s, and every time we changed counties, you had to change the cassette tape that was underneath the seat to change the mapping data. So this is no GPS, right? Like it is tracking the number of revolutions of the car, of the wheels. But that company that came out of that incubator, it was one of the first incubators, ended up being some of the fundamental infrastructure in our modern mapping now. And interesting little story, that incubator had an asteroids in the cafeteria. And the engineers who were building that mapping company were, trying to figure out how are we going to represent the car on the map. And they were like, oh, asteroids, the little ship, the little triangle. And if you look at most of your mapping now, your Tesla, your, whatever, you will be represented as a little ship. And it's like still to this day, like rooted in the asteroid ship.
That's amazing.
How do we hack that and like actually add some asteroids and things while we're driving just to keep us entertained, where we can like just sort of pretend to shoot things like on a little overhead display, like augmented reality our driving.
I can't wait for AR driving, man. If nothing else, for everybody else in the car, it's like we do need to, the driver in theory for a little while at least still needs to focus on the road. But why can't the rest of us defend, ourselves from a zombie apocalypse, or travel through, what this used to look like 200 years ago.
Yeah, I suppose when self-driving hits, the first thing we're going to do is blast a bunch of asteroids. Like when it really catches on and feels, feels safe enough to to blast some alien spaceship pixels.
Rampage in real life, So that that incubator, created some cool stuff. Also, a robot company that happened, maybe 40 years too early. But we ended up as a family going through some pretty hard financial times in a way that surprises people. But it was hard. And we sort of saw how entrepreneurship can be great and can be terrible.
The roller coasters of owning a business.
Yeah.
So do you think, like you're talking about the robotics, like my early 5-year-old memories of Chuck E. Cheese were of the animatronic figures that were always looking at me and playing guitar during the birthday songs and everything. Did some of that, you think, speak into creative ideas in other industries? I know when you come across people with creative brains, it doesn't matter what industry they're coming from, and they've got a way to somehow overlap and connect.
Oh, that synthesis. I'm such a huge fan of drawing from lots of domains and, try to just, get as much randomness into my life as possible. And actually something my dad was a big fan of and, really lodged in my brain is conference crashing. Right, going to random conferences that have nothing to do with your life, and whenever you're somewhere staying at a hotel and there's a random conference and you just like figure out what it is and and then poke your head in, and most often it's in those big ballrooms that have 700 doors and security on 2 of them. So I mean, it's like not the worst thing to get into, but you get such a fun snapshot of an industry wandering around it, and I think you see some innovation in packaging or food, natural foods or whatever, and you think, man, this has relevance in some other place in my life.
That's a good insight. The conference crashing. I think people that catalog the world around them, I think creatives do a really good job of filing things away. Like they can be on a hike and look at a pine cone.
How's your photo, database? Are you just constantly taking pictures?
Oh my gosh. Between just taking pictures and then even like my notes, like my Apple Notes, like I don't know how many pages and pages of those spreadsheets. I'm like, oh, I saw this. And you file that away. Maybe you'll need it someday.
So I'm really curious about your note procedure, because it's something that I have really been iterating now for some time. But I have this leather, just literally it's a really sort of folded piece of leather, and then 8 these note cards in it. And this goes with me in my back pocket absolutely everywhere. And the note cards are a way of both quickly jotting something down, when I'm driving or whatever, but also if I'm, sitting in a meeting with you guys and, we're riffing, we're having fun, it's like so much more in the moment to be taking notes on paper than it is to get out my phone and see and be distracted instantly and forget why I was taking the note in the first place. And it's socially awkward for you guys because you're like, this guy's not even paying attention to me. He's freaking on his phone now, and all the while, all I wanted to do was take a freaking note, and there's something to the physical paper and also just the unbounded, you can sort of don't have to be on a line and using text, or, you can sort of do whatever you want. And then later, sit down with those notes at a computer in focus time and send them off to any of a variety of different note databases for later, usage.
I think you're onto something. I think there's some sort of synapses, especially us that are like products of the 70s, raised by the 80s, that, we grew up very tactile. Everything was, crayons and colored pencils, and where an idea first came reality while we're striking a piece of paper with a colored pencil. And so I think part of our brains align that way because that's how, during the most creative, unbounded creative times of our life, when we're like 8, 9 years old, that's how we were outputting. And I do believe, to your point, getting it down on paper, it's the first stage of something becoming reality. Like an idea is still just an idea when it's in your head. There's no tangible existence of it. It's still neurons firing. But the second you put it on paper, that's the first tangible piece of that in existence. So I love the practice, Brent, and I think it's very important.
And David, I love your sort of notion of like bringing it into existence, because the thing for me, that at this point all projects go through is they start as a scribble somewhere, and then they are their own dedicated note. And I actually use Obsidian, this kind of cool note after Evernote. And so each one ends up as their own little Obsidian note. And then over the next weeks and months, whenever I see something having to do with that project, it goes as a little clip on that note, and then once I can really focus on that project, I look at that note and it's like, wow, look at how much it's grown, without me actively focusing on it, just the sort of passive trickle of stuff in there as it background processes is, gets to be so powerful. 'Cause, you get that sort of really early time, early creative time that can take a while and needs a lot of sort of background processing.
Obsidian is amazing. I use that all the time.
You love it?
Yeah.
Oh,
I use it for Dungeons and Dragons though. That's how I take all my notes for my campaigns and stuff. That's like
cool. And you could probably get a long way with the templates and whatnot. Yeah,
and the plugins are incredible. Like the library, it's amazing. Yeah.
I love knowing it. Great.
It's good nerd application right there. We all need them.
And my D&D characters are in Obsidian too.
Nice.
We do become processors, and like these creative processors of gathering the world around us. And like, your childhood of watching the whole story arc of, Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, and growing up with, siblings that are all in that world, and a dad who's inspiring that world and making it normal. I think that's the normalification of you can have an idea and actually get it out there is not normal to everybody.
Yeah,
And
totally agree.
You got to be equipped with, hey, if I can imagine it, I can make it from an early age that not everybody got.
Yeah.
So how did you go from that childhood to entering into the world of play on your own? Like, when did the training wheels come off? Like, when did it become, Brent's thing?
Such a good question. And our dad made a pretty early decision that he was going to give us no money, and he was very clear with all of us about that. And, it was very cool because we just sort of never grew up expecting it. He was always expected us to work hard and, weeding the garden and having jobs. I was bagging groceries, as a 13-year-old. Sort of setting the table like that, I think we all were like, yeah, not only we don't need anything, we don't need games and entertainment. We're going to do it completely on our own, because he had really instilled this like independence thread. And so, all of the first stuff that I focused on, I loved engineering and science and whatnot. And so that had, really permeated. But my first company was outsourced IT. We were doing, websites and email hosting and stuff for small businesses. And, I had a server, a bunch of servers in a bank vault in downtown LA, and if I needed more capacity, I needed a month and, to drive down there at midnight to bring the server online. What you can do with Amazon EC2 now, it just is like hilarious, how much work it used to be for me.
Was that your college? Was your college background engineering then?
Yeah, computer science.
Computer science.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I just and it was really neat because I was, I'd been running that company and then was going to school. And so I kind of wanted to know all the stuff, it was like I'd had that problem, a database scaling problem, a operating system problem, and so the professors that I was learning from, I just wanted to know everything, and so I was, sitting at the front of the class and just cared about it because it was so relevant to what I was doing in, on the business side. And so I really, really loved that period and just couldn't get enough, and took classes that had nothing to do with my major, but were totally fascinating. And so it wasn't until really later when I met my co-founder Eric, and I was finishing up at UCLA, and my dad was working on this high-tech restaurant U-Wink, and I had my outsourced IT company, and he had just got I just connected him with his new CTO for that, who's a guy that I knew, and the guy that right as they got funding, the guy that I knew was like, hey, you've already got a team and all your infrastructure. He's like, why don't you guys come and build this with us? And I was like, oh man, I've already got my own thing. It's like, I don't need to work with family, the independence thing. And he was like, no, we'll just get it done in 6 months and then you can go back to your stuff. And of course that didn't happen. It didn't take 6 months, and it was like a whole saga. But I, was back in the fold of, around games and play, and brought the LA hacker group down there and met Doug Campbell. And that got me in, going down to the brewery, Arts Lofts, and I met my co-founder, Eric Gradman. And, it was the sort of playing games and showcasing games as part of Mindshare and that whole period, that really just got me back into like, wow, I love this stuff. I've been doing this, I've did this for so long, but there was this whole period without it. So it was nice to kind of rediscover it, the long way.
He's like, how did I spend this time in purgatory working on servers?
Well, it's so funny, dude, because some of our clients was like, we were doing outsourced IT for aftermarket insurance, like the salvage industry. I would drive up to Chatsworth, to wrecking yards and stuff, and police impounds, protected with razor wire, so that we could help get them on the internet, and it was like so much different.
And those are all things that need to be done. And I'm grateful that people will do all the different jobs. Everybody finds their own niche, but some people are just this out for the industry of play.
Well, I mean, the thing that was so amazing, this was 2001 sort of, this was like software, we were delivering software as a service kind of before that was a term, it was, and application service provisioning, ASP, was part of sort of the .com era that was fizzling. And so we were, here we were building web pages to deliver stuff over the internet. They could give the insurer some data and the tow yard some data. And, it was sort of like, it was so interesting technically, but, I really, my heart just sang when I was on the games.
So getting back into toward the industry of play and some games, like how did that, like, what were the next steps? Like, how did that end up becoming then a business for you?
So, now we're sort of 2008 timeframe, and Mindshare is Doug Campbell's, kind of monthly meetup in downtown Los Angeles. That was literally like a rave for nerds. It would be like, different speakers on different topics. We'd get, like there'd be a rocket scientist talking about rockets, and then a nanotechnologist talking about, the latest in materials. So there'd be all this like really cool stuff. And then it would break for like a cocktail party and interactive arts. And and Doug had sort of got together, 5 or 10 nerds one night and said, "Hey, do you guys have any projects you could show at Mindshare?" And, I had this 6-player game table, and Eric and I had met and had become fast friends and started making this like interactive whiteboard. And so we started showing that stuff at Mindshare, and people loved it, and we were like, man, this is a lot of fun, and so we challenged ourselves to make something new every single month. And we had a room of laser beams and a wall of buttons and a 3-on-3 space battle experience that was just like massively complicated. I can't believe we did it in a month. All this stuff that we were just throwing at the wall to see what stuck. And it wasn't a business yet. It was really just a passion. And then somebody from Microsoft was in the audience at one of those events and was like, "Hey, we got E3 coming up. Like, we got a big after party. Like, would you guys do the entertainment?" And we're like, "What? You're going to pay us?" Like, there's a business here. And so it started this, sort of period of us as this like traveling nerd circus that would just bring this stuff to, Intel's conferences and, Amazon's, holiday party. And so it was fun. Like, we did this one event, Amazon's reInvent. It was us and Deadmau5. It was like so freaking cool. So we were, and then from there, the next transition was Intel was one of the first to be like, "Hey, thanks for doing that thing. We'd love some custom stuff, use Intel chips and let's change this thing. And we're going to showcase it at CES." And that sort of started this like Imagineering phase of us, sort of working with brands, particularly for, public exhibition installations. Did a lot of work with Dave & Buster's, in the early days of virtual reality. Kevin Bacchus over there was curious about all sorts of operational things. How long do people want to do it? Do they care about the cleanliness? What are they willing to pay? Very, really, important business questions. And so there weren't VR attractions at the time. So we went down to, Oculus and got prototype DK1s like from Palmer Luckey directly. And, we built like some of the first, VR attractions since the 90s. We did like a 4-player driving game and a 2-player skydiving, and it was really fun, fun experience, sort of learning on, together with these brands, for how to do this stuff in public, and it got us doing a lot of big custom things. We launched VR for Samsung at the Olympics and the Super Bowl, huge installations for Verizon at Davos. And so that was really, a fascinating period of, public installations in the early days of immersive, really. Our immersive agencies are now sort of, there's a lot of them now, but this was, still sort of in the 2010s and stuff like that, still sort of an early concept.
How long till we're like in Ready Player One? Like,
man, the thing that made that feel so much closer, this company Haptex, HAPTX.
Oh yeah, the wearables.
Just at AWE, their recent version is incredible. It's a backpack, and you have 2 gloves, and the gloves both have full temperature, and haptic feedback. And so you can, hold a Coke can that's virtual and feel the cold on your hand, and then a dragon flies in and blasts flame on your hands, and you feel the heat. So, oh my God. They showed me a rendering of a future with a sort of like the size of a treadmill that was a device that, imagine like an exoskeleton for your legs, that has a mount at the hips, almost like a Peter Pan harness, so that you could then rotate this thing to be able to fly, right? If you were in VR, you could fly. You could, allow yourself to walk infinitely, in a tiny enclosed space. It was, combined with a great headset. That's the big thing that we're missing, right? Is all the rest of your sort of body encoding in a way that's compatible with your living environment. And this machine really could be it, And so I think, to your point, things like Fortnite and UEFN and all those, the software side of Ready Player One is a hell of a lot closer than the hardware side. But I think the hardware side, just with something like haptics, is the gap is getting closed.
To me, that is just the I can't believe it exists in our lifetime. It's like as kids, like thinking, oh, if you could just be in this video game, and we're playing the first Super Mario Brothers, where it's just, a guy's made of a couple of pixels, to suddenly you're feeling the fire of the dragon.
Yeah, man, I feel like that's not just our lifetime. I think less than a decade.
Well, I'm kind of already amazed too at how the level of immersion you can get. It doesn't even necessarily have to be realistic with just the headset. You just have to feel like you're present.
Yeah. And the one that has absolutely, was jaw-droppingly awesome is pass-through video AR. We were the whole recent phase of AR, the Magic Leap, the HoloLens, had the fundamental design assumption that you were looking through the lens at real life, right? And so necessarily it had to be a very narrow field of view. You were really, so hyper aware of here's the augmented part and here's the not augmented part, right? And in pass-through video mode, you put it on, and if it's just straight up pass-through video, your mind updates to, this is now the way that I see the world, is this pass-through video version is the only version I see. But then you augment that, and it's your entire visual field. Oh my God, it's so awesome. We did a test on drift trikes in our parking lot, so that you had the headset on, and in the parking lot there were fake barriers and there were fake gates, and you had coins to collect like it was Mario Kart. And this was a social game, so you were in the lead, and it had a little one floating over your head, and you just collected coins that I can't get now. And me and one other person are biking around in our parking lot in this pass-through video AR. And I go twice around the parking lot, and my heart rate on my watch is 130. And I freaking take the headset off, and there's nothing there. There's none of those challenges, all that stuff that had just motivated me to crush myself into, racing around this thing. All of it was in my head. And it was really rad. I feel like
really rad. What else needs to be said? It was really rad. I think on top of the the processing and the hardware, I think one thing they're going to have to start solving is how to not get sweaty. Because all of a sudden when this happens, even playing Super Hot, which is it's a first person shooter, but the faster you move, the faster your opponent moves. So you move slow. Yeah. But somehow it's like doing hot yoga, and and before you know it, you're just dripping, and I'm I'm not moving. True. Why am I so sweaty?
Well, I'm just it's like Tai Chi, the Tai Chi of VR games, My brother, my youngest brother Wyatt, loves doing Beat Saber with weights on.
Oh my gosh.
So he'll put on, on his wrists and on his, and then he'll sit there and, you do that long enough, that's a real workout. Mm-hmm.
No, it is. It's way more fun than just standing on a treadmill.
Yeah. Well, this is, I think, a big future for us and for play is people will play soccer with a broken foot. Their head is so in the game, they just are like, what? My body is a distant, thought that for what is happening in the meta. And whereas you're on a freaking treadmill, could not be more hyper aware. That timer, when am I going to freaking get off this thing? And so those are, for me, sort of two stark opposing concepts. How do we get it to feel more like soccer all the time, without having to coordinate however many people play soccer? And then extend that to not just fitness, but learning and therapy and everything else. It's I would so much rather learn in situ, hey, Brent, go fix the roller coaster, and in this simulator, you're going to learn a little bit about viscosity, a little bit about welding, a little bit about, business. And, it's like, it would be so neat to have the learnings be in context as opposed to just totally regurgitated out of context in a weird format that has nothing to do with how people learn. And instead how we want to, segment kids, like to make it easy for us.
Spoken like a true parent right there. Like, having kids, like your lens on creative play, like really starts to shift and be a little bit more insightful.
Having a lot of younger siblings, I feel like I'd sort of have been around kids for my whole life. When I think about my own education, the stuff that was project based is the only stuff I really remember. All the rest of it is just a big morass of potentially wasted time, like the stuff that was project. I still remember Dr. Woosnam, junior year, we had to solve a safety problem. And we had a semester to do it, and we had to pick the domain that was a real safety problem. We had to come up with a prototype, make sure, do patent research, build the prototype, build marketing materials. It was so freaking awesome. It was so in context and so memorable. I still remember all the stuff. Like it was just, like it was yesterday. And you could ask me for an entire, high school's worth of another course, and I would have nothing for you.
It's like putting pencil to paper, actually making something that helps it stick for sure.
Back to the immersion, part of where that stickiness, things that stick, things that are memorable, they happen in the presence of emotion, right? If you have a lot of, enthusiasm or sadness or something, more emotion, more permanent, more senses, right? So if we're talking about immersion in Ready Player One or whatever, if we really have your eyes and we really have your ears and and you're not competing for multiple other displays or multiple other things, it is fully focused on this display. It's your audio fully focused on this thing. The rest of your body, that's all super important. The method of delivery, right? Are you in a passive just receive it, which is a very low brain activity state? If you are being asked to make decisions, that's more permanent, right? The second you have to be engaged, and so all of these things, you could imagine the hyper effective learning experience, that look very little like our current approach.
You were doing a lot of this like development, the VR stuff for like contract work for different end users, and but yet you ended up creating a play space of your own. Like, do you want to maybe share some of that adventure?
So imagine, we were doing a bunch of events for other people because we had this contract work, but we were still investing in making our own games. And then, after some big projects, we thought, gosh, we keep bringing all this stuff to other people's places, and some of these are custom installations. A cloud that rains tequila. We freaking won a Cannes Lion Award for this thing. And after the marketing activation was done, it went in the trash. And we were like, man, we need a place to put this stuff. Like, are you telling us really we're just going to put that in the trash? And so we'd always wanted to build, to do stuff of our own, and continued to sort of invest in our own games. And the idea that we might have our own event was the first step. And so we imagine the idea for the STEAM Carnival. And at the time, STEM was a big term for everybody, science, technology, engineering, and math. It was a way politicians, could talk about needing more of that in school, and industry could ask for it. And, in theory, we weren't graduating enough of them, especially in the U.S. And so, but John Maida from RISD had put a paper out about STEAM. And I was like, wow, yeah. Art, you add the art into the STEM, and here, we were a bunch of STEM nerds, but we're having a ball, a lot of because of the creativity and the art part, and we really put that part up on the streets, and we just sort of figured out that the art, how much fun that had sort of brought, and frankly, it was always a creative exercise, engineering, and so we called it STEAM Carnival. And the idea was, one half all the high-tech entertainment we'd made, and then one half a bunch of hands-on projects to inspire kids to do it themselves. The message being like, hey, we built this stuff and it's not that hard. You can too. Here's how, and all the fundamentals, programming and fabrication and creativity and design thinking. And so we put it on Kickstarter, filmed a really fun video, and just blasted it out there. And this was 2013, so Kickstarter was sort of at a real height, and we thought, okay, let's have the limit be $100,000. because, you know, there was a bunch of things that had made millions and, you know, some things that had flopped and made $5,000. And, you know, and we were like, we'll either blow past this or not. And that'll be the signal for whether we should do it or not. And so we put out the video and we end up with all this coverage and Time and USA Today and Discovery Channel and all this stuff. But meanwhile, our Kickstarter is just like ticking up. You know, we were, you know, at 50 grand and 60 grand. And like, you know, we come to the end of our 30 days and we're at like 99 grand, you know, and we're like, oh my God. You know, it's like we barely tip over by the time this thing is done. So we're like, okay, well, this is like the worst possible scenario. We've like told everybody we're doing this thing. We've made it over the you know, imagined threshold, but 100 grand is not enough to deliver this crazy, awesome carnival that we've told everybody.
No.
So we were like, man, this is not good. And so really for the next 2 years, we, you know, I went out and raised money from sponsors, and we, you know, I mean, I must have spoke about the Steam Carnival and just Steam in general, sort of educated America, frankly, on Steam as a concept, you know, in multiple TEDx talks and multiple talks to brands and just all these, you know, everywhere, anybody would listen. And ended up with incredible sponsors. And so by the end of 2014, we did a carnival in Los Angeles, 5,000 people a day. It was 90,000 square feet. You know, I mean, it was just absolutely ginormous. We had, you know, I just loved, you know, the IBM and Intel and Autodesk and Disney and all these incredible sponsors, you know, partners, and a fire suit company. And my favorite thing for this fire suit company, because we had, in addition to all the games we've made over the years, we also had the Dunk Tank Flambe, where we were like, you know, okay, dunk tanks with water are fine, but fire is freaking awesome. So ours was the dunk tank. You would throw a ball, you know, hit the thing, and then the person wearing the dunk tank, you know, wearing the fire suit, would get immersed in a fireball. And it was just so spectacular and awesome. And that was when I learned that fire marshals are total pyros. You know, firemen and fire marshals, total pyros. They just want to know that you're doing it right, you know? And so they'd all come down and they'd be, you know, and then they'd see, oh, we're a bunch of nerds and we'd all done it by the book and we had card carrying special effects experts and the whole thing. And then they'd just stay there the whole night, throwing the ball and getting their kids around. And, you know, it was just amazing. But so we did that event in LA. And then, you know, it was a big success, but we, you know, by the time we were done, we just wanted to die. It was so exhausting. We, in the Kickstarter, had promised 2 cities, LA and San Francisco. And coming out of LA, we were thinking, well, maybe we should tour it across the country. We'll do San Francisco and Denver and Charlotte. So we work, you know, and go back to the, you know, fun, you know.
You're like trying to make a traveling circus? Like that's like a
traveling carnival, man. We didn't know anything. Like we just didn't know any better. And you know, the thing that really dawned on us, you know, going into San Francisco was just how hard it is to industrialize this stuff. You know, a traveling museum exhibit can take a freaking missile. You know, those things are built to last. They are built not just for the abuse that they take from the general public. They're built from the abuse that they will take in being crated up and then put on a truck and bounced around on a freeway and taken off the truck and uncrated. You know, all that stuff is hard on gear. And so, you know, everything, you know, just I like to think that everything that moves breaks. Ultimately, you know, it's just a question of time. And so all things, fans, you know, things you put on it, it's all just going to break. And so knowing that, you know, we going into San Francisco, we were like, we're going to travel across the country. And coming out of San Francisco, we're like, we can never do that again. And so what happened was San Francisco, we did, you know, a year later, we did San Francisco. We, by that time had gotten connected with some investors, traditional investors who were like, you know, incredible supporters and really saw that we were onto something. I'm not sure anybody really knew what we were, you know, there was clear audience, there was clear excitement, enthusiasm, social media following, all that stuff. And, you know, but the traveling portion, we were like, gosh, this should be permanent, you know, like rather than popping it up for a weekend, you know, and doing 5,000 people a day, what if we popped it up into something slightly smaller and could bring people 365 days a year, you know, and if we solve the problem locally, there's 500 locations across the country that this needs to be solved. And so that was how we ended up at Permanent. And so in the end of 2015, I did this rendering for a term we just made up called a micro amusement park. But the idea was, blending together lots of different domains, full food and beverage, but then, interactive game show theater, our story rooms, sort of automated escape rooms, virtual reality, arcade. And the idea was a nice blend of entertainment. So you couldn't do it all, the first or second time. And there was a lot of ways for the content to change.
So where do you go from here? You've got this exhibit, you got the escape room. Sounds like a mashup of all these different exhibits all at once. Like,
yeah,
what's next?
After the traveling carnival, going permanent in Los Angeles, came with so much incredible learning. 50,000 square feet. We took over a half a city block, and it really so much incredible, interesting stuff, and hard as hell. Glutton for punishment over here.
This has been unreal. Unfortunately, our time is coming to a close here, and what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this into episode 2. So you make sure you follow through and get to hear what's next. What is next? What's coming next? A little teaser here.
So in the story, we go permanent. We have get through some portion of the pandemic, and I've been continue to focus on all sorts of futuristic stuff ever since. I've got this interactive game show controller for 100 players, a open source arcade cabinet we'll be releasing later this year. Just all sorts of fun, and more augmented reality, of course.
It's unreal. Like for people that want to follow you on social media, we've got at Brent Bushnell. We'll share that in the comments and everything, so people can click on that and find and follow you. Brent's got more stuff. Follow along for the next episode, because this is just an unreal person of creativity and imagination and execution. So loving it. But before we go,
to close things out, we like to ask a few randomized questions on our hidden roll die.
So Branson's rolling in proxy for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'll try to roll well here. This is the
custom die.
All right. First question of 3.
The Broken Heart. Are there popular games you simply don't understand the hype about?
I think a lot of the Web3 stuff, it felt like I love, there's so many aspects of Web3 I love. A lot of the token-based gaming, the economic model has really, I felt like maybe people in the Philippines, this is working, but I don't see how this is working for anybody else. And that really has never tracked for me.
Good answer. All right, next one.
Second roll.
The Star. You're coming to my house tomorrow. What are 2 games you're going to bring with you that we're going to play?
Oh, thank you for asking this question. I would bring a bunch of decks of cards, like probably 8 to 10 decks of cards, so we could play Pounce, which is totally a Bushnell family favorite. Some people call it Nerds.
Oh, yeah, I know Nerds.
Pounce, you put down a nice big towel on the table. We play it standing up so you can get full mobility. But you'll scale to 8, 10, 12 people, and it's just such a fun speed game. So I'd bring Pounce. And then the second game would really depend. Are we going to be outside? I'd probably bring Stump Tug of War, which is just literally a rope, but it's just so much fun. I have a little tiny kit if it's if we're going portable. I love timelines. I love the little ice house pieces. Kendo is really such a fun version of the ice house game. That's probably the short list.
Those are good. Yeah, Timeline, I feel like that's one of those good ones that sort of tricks you into education. It's like,
yeah, and you just you just are like, oh, I just learned something. Wow, cool. Yeah, you're so right. That's a great example.
There's one little thing. Some of those though are written a little bit from like the Western perspective of like it gives you the timeline, like the date of when Westerners discovered it versus like when it actually existed. And so I'm like, some of those can be cleaned up a little bit. Marvelous game though, marvelous game. All right, one more roll.
Final roll.
Ooh, the $sign. And can you even reach it anymore? There we go, dollar sign. Well, this is a good question for you. If money were no object, what mega game would you make?
Wow.
Of all the people to ask this.
Man, I think the thing that I am just so obsessed with is a massive competition, that would be I would want to be able to like engage people in a phased competition. So imagine everybody can compete like HQ Trivia for the first few weeks, but you're part of a team. And people are getting wheeled out like Hunger Games, but nobody dies. And then as you start to sort of progress it to some physical stuff, you'd take like the top 25 cities and there'd be some physical challenge that people could all be run through, and then you would sort of slowly whittle this thing down so that each of the teams ended up with their sort of gladiator, but there were still lots of ways for the teams to contribute to the gladiator in the final games, so what would start as hyper interactive, everybody would transition, your interactivity would sort of transition to something, supporting your team. But I would just love a sporting event that had more participation.
Love it. It's like bringing video games into the Olympics. It's like a big ask, but that'd be awesome.
It could be awesome, and it's also, I think, going to be a great experiment because we're going to want it for a lot more, and I think as we were talking about earlier with all the immersive, it's going to be video games are going to get off of just, how good's your reaction time to full body, and you're in, a virtual flying experience that we're going to have great contenders, from every country.
Well, Brent, this has been unreal. I think our listeners are in for a treat, getting to just be inspired by your story and what you do. And again, you guys can find him at Brent Bushnell. You'll find that in the comments, and we will be following up with a round 2. So make sure you tune into that.
Yep. And subscribe.
Please do. And until next time, keep playing games. Thank you, Brent, for being here so much.
Thank you.
You guys, thanks a lot. It's been a lot of fun.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way that you can support us is to subscribe to our YouTube channel and tell your favorite brains to subscribe as well. Hit the bell, thumbs up, leave a comment, and follow Hidden Roll Podcast on Instagram as well. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to be on our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, leave a comment below, or send us a message at hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. That's hidden, ROLE, podcast.com. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design.